This is getting better by the minute. Welcome to Predator Minute, the podcast that breaks down the 1987 action sci-fi classic Predator 1 minute at a time. My name is John, and unfortunately, I am out. My co-host, my brother Aaron, again, is out doing the doctor thing in Zimbabwe, in Africa. And so I've been lucky enough to find guests within my own family and my circle of friends, and today is no different. I'm joined today by my cousin Patrick.
Hi, John.
Hello, how are you, Patrick?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to talk some Predator.
Yeah, it was fun coming across your movie blog. I'm just going to jump into that right now before we jump in the content, but I think my wife or my dad sent some information that you do a movie blog, and like my first thought, of course, selfishly, was I have to ask Patrick to be on the podcast, and you're just gung-ho about it. So do you want to talk about the movie blog first?
I can talk about it now.
Sure, go for it. Yeah.
For the last 3.5 years, I've been running this little blog, just a simple little WordPress thing, but it's usually it'll be just whatever. I enjoy going to the movies just as a viewer, but whatever I go to see, I try and write a review about. It's a little bit of it's kind of a two-prong. It's sort of just a review, just to kind of get my thoughts out there and say what I'm thinking. There's a little bit of a consumer advocacy component of it where I do at the end usually say whether or not I think it's worthwhile to see the movie. So I do have a handful of people who say they base their movie going options off what I say. So I hope I haven't steered anybody wrong, but it's definitely been interesting to just learn how to express what my thoughts on movies, and then certainly it's been good for learning how to analyze movies and analyze different elements, both in terms of the narrative, what's going on in the plot, but then also other technical things. What were the people making it? What were the directions decisions? What were the the special effects or music or other things like that? So it's definitely helped me to see movies in a different way, and I look forward to for this podcast kind of getting to apply some of that to this latest minute of the Predator that we're going to be watching. Not the Predator.
Oh yeah, you almost misspoke.
Well, yeah, you got to be careful.
Yeah, and when I first heard about your movie blog, the very first review I went for was the Predator review, and we will save that review for later on in the show, just a little teaser for later.
Sounds good.
But we're going to be talking minute 12 of Predator today, and minute 12 opens with Dylan taking in the new environment he just landed in, and ends with a descending crane shot of more jungle. And just to give a quick nudge to Honest Trailers, I don't know, have you ever watched Honest Trailers?
Indeed I have.
Okay, yeah, with John, I can't remember his last name, Bailey. Add that in later. I'll vocalize that later. Bailey, the guy doing the trailers or whatever, the narration. Bailey. One of the my favorite lines. I just watched that yesterday. The Honest Trailers for Predator, and one of the things he made a point of, he's like, people forget with all this awesome action and all these awesome lines that half of the movie is just looking at jungle, and just laughing, making the notes for this minute, because there are quite a few shots just of jungle with no characters or anything else going on.
It's interesting. Did you ever read Huck Finn?
Long time ago.
People used to say the river in that book was kind of a character in and of itself. You could argue that in Predator, the jungle is kind of a character in and of itself.
You could. I would. Yeah, and I'm going to reference this field guide for jungle operations later on in the minute today, but it does, like the field manual itself does kind of speak to that jungle as a character, just the characteristics of it, and just how dangerous of an environment it can be for any kind of operation.
Yep.
So you being the guest, though, Patrick, I always open it up to the guest first. What would you like to talk about for this minute?
So I guess we can start just sort of from the beginning in terms of the scene. So it's that first shot that we see. It's so I was kind of trying to think, is it it continues a little bit from where the last minute ended, but it's that, a very long shot that starts out kind of circling around Dylan, and then it sort of kind of lays back behind as our team kind of proceeds into the jungle, and then ends up, I think the last person that it's following there is Blaine. But it's interesting because it's a pretty long continuous shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always thinking, I try to think more about technical elements now. Is that a crane? Is that somebody sort of holding that, kind of a Steadicam type thing? I would sort of think, I think it's probably Steadicam, and if so, it's sort of impressive because you can sort of see there that it's not very even ground at all. So you figure that that's somebody who's kind of got a camera in front of them, that they are having to steady themselves and having to kind of walk and make sure that it's all good, and it's not shaky. So it's actually, just from technically, that's a really impressive shot, as we sort of are kind of really getting the team involved and then watching them go into the jungle. So that was kind of my first thought.
Just counting the number of shots, and John McTiernan is really proud of his early movies, at least, and how few cuts he would have.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the same thing in this minute, where a good chunk of, like what you're saying, that handheld Steadicam must be lasting the first, 20 seconds or so of this shot, or of this minute.
Yeah.
Which is actual continuation of the previous minute. So that all together, that's about a 30-second shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after, like, a little 5-second interstitial, when you zoom into Poncho's face, goes from like Poncho's face to a rack focus to following Dutch giving hand signals, and that whole thing is an entire shot in itself, an entire 30-second shot in itself. So like you're saying, just from a technical standpoint, it's very impressive. So many moving pieces with like following Dylan and Blaine and Dutch and Mac, and like in front of them, even, like, you just barely see it, but like they've even sent out the first couple people just for the shot, and you barely see Hawkins and or Billy who are leading the line. So like you're saying, it's really impressive. It's like just a true craftsman at work here.
Absolutely. And this first shot is also, I believe, where we get our first look at one of my favorite things about it, which is what Blaine is carrying. We see
I think the word you're looking for is character.
Yeah, character. Because we see that he's got, is the correct term the minigun, or what is?
It is the correct term, and just like all good characters, it has a name.
Yep.
Old Painless. Old Painless is waiting.
Yep. So I find this kind of interesting, sort of from two different things, because earlier in one of the earlier minutes, we hear Blaine talking. He's chewing, and he's talking about this stuff will make you a sexual Tyrannosaurus.
Just like me.
Yeah, and you can really get a feel for this guy is really full of himself and cocky and macho, but in a fun way. And what a perfect weapon to complement his personality.
Yep.
Although you got to wonder. I mean, he puts up. He puts up such bravado. You got to wonder. I mean, is this sort of.
Compensating,
yeah.
Could be, making all the statements, sexual Tyrannosaurus, using like a gay slur against other people, and carrying the biggest gun ever carried in the history of cinema up to that point. Yeah, maybe. And if you read into it, and John McTiernan talks about this later on in his own like post reflections about Predator, about one of the main themes being the impotence of weapons, of like, I guess you could go to a further degree and say masculinity in the face of certain forces or certain things. Those certain forces or certain things, I don't really know what Predator is really meant to represent at this point, because I haven't really thought deeply yet about the monster angle and the creature angle. But it's interesting to hear what you're saying and connect that to what McTiernan has talked about in the past, what the ineffectiveness of these weapons end up representing.
The other thing that I find interesting about Old Painless is that, up to this point, what Dutch and his team have been told by Dylan is this is a rescue operation. This is extraction. You're going to get in, you're going to get out. So
we're not assassins.
They're not assassins. And that is... under that description, that is, Old Painless is like the least fitting weapon for what they're supposedly doing. Which, so either they really subscribe to the Boy Scout mantra of be prepared in case everything goes, to heck in a handbasket, Or the other thing I was thinking, because the earlier Dutch mentions they like to do things their own way, and what I
Right.
sort of wonder if he, maybe as a leader, maybe the reason why they have so much respect for him is that he just lets his individual team members choose their own weapons.
Yeah.
If you want to haul a 50-pound minigun into the jungle because that's what you feel most comfortable with, who am I to stop you?
Right. Plus all the
Uh,
ammo. You see the backpack on his back,
oh,
and
yeah.
that's just like a fraction of what, right, we've talked about. I've talked about it in a previous minute, but that's just a fraction of what you would need to mow down a jungle for a good 2 minutes. It's seriously like you need a helicopter worth of that ammo, just how quickly it goes through.
Yep.
I like how you mentioned everybody has their different loadouts. It's one of the notes I took right away when you see that handheld Steadicam shot of Dylan following the rest of the troops.
Mm-hmm.
You see just like over the shoulders, you can see Dutch holding his M16. You see Dylan with the MP5. You see Mac with the M60 machine gun. That's that heavy machine gun that probably at that point up until the minigun, you're thinking, wow, that's like a huge gun for someone to handhold. And then you have Blaine with the MP5. But then also with the the rucksack full of minigun, full of Old Painless, and yeah, everybody kind of doing things their own way. And later on, you see Poncho with his own grenade launcher that was made just for the film. Hawkins, I think, is using MP5 like the others, and Billy he's using machine guns and similar things to other people until the very end when he has his machete out.
It's interesting because he definitely it's talking about, you mentioned that the director talked about impotence and sort of that he definitely sells in the shot when you see these folks with their guns sort of for the first time that these are people you really don't want. I mean, not that you wouldn't think that when you first saw them, but now he's kind of reinforcing these are really tough guys, and what are they going to be going up against that this wouldn't be, that these guys couldn't handle it.
And they're all carrying the weapons around in the jungle and looking all formidable, which is a complete different take than what we saw from them on the chopper ride over, where they were just joking around,
goofing
around, giving each other a hard time,
jamming to Long Tall Sally,
bopping their heads to the music, and like there's no smiles here. There's not even any talking, which is awesome for a minute. It's like I would say it's like really the first minute in this movie where there truly is no talking, because before where there was no talking, those first couple minutes they had the credits rolling, and generally you're not going to have people talking and given a lot of dialogue and interaction when credits are rolling in the beginning. So it's cool to just to have a silent minute and they're just telling you everything you need to know, just like you're saying. Not a team you would mess with. They're all business. And they pan around Dylan there, and they are just like hustling through the jungle, where they change scenery to the next scene. They cut in the middle of this minute, and we see the next scene, which is, I would say, a crane shot lowering for a few seconds, and then it zooms right into Poncho's face as he's looking slightly up, into maybe the lower canopy.
Talking about that crane shot for a second there, it does highlight one of the things, and I know this is going to sound sort of very obvious, but obviously jungles are very, very thick in foliage, and one of the things I think this crane shot is sort of emphasizing is when you're right in the thick of a jungle is how hard it is to see. Now we'll learn later that the predator has things at his disposal to camouflage himself, but even if he didn't, I mean, visibility is so restricted in the jungle that it's very easy basically for anybody to hide.
Yeah.
So I think that a shot like that is sort of an early sign of that there's just so much foliage that it's really hard to see more than a couple feet in front of you.
Yeah, and they're totally putting the foliage just right in front of the camera, like here, but also in the next few seconds after it goes from Poncho to look in the background at Hawkins, and he taps Dutch on the shoulder, and like there's a full, 5 to 7 seconds of just like this bush right in the way, just totally obstructing everything. And the bush isn't meant to hide like a tricky edit or anything like that. It's just to be in the way and kind of like, come on, move that camera to something I can see, like, giving the audience that claustrophobia that Aaron and I have been just hammering on so much this time. It's like, like this jungle, right? It might be like a natural environment, but everything is so up close, like the terrain, the trees, vines, the mist itself. There's like this mist overlaid overlaying everything, and that itself is just making everything more obscure. Yeah, and just adding to the confusion of the visuals, and then adding, I would say, to the confusion in the audio is something you took a note of too. If you want to talk about the score and the sound effects.
So the next shot that we have here is showing Poncho kind of looking up at something in the trees, and while this is going on, there's that we get the first instance of this little sort of drum thing that's this kind of tribal sounding.
I love the drums.
It's
oh my
great,
gosh.
and it's used a lot in the film, but it's sort of a sign. It means, you know, it's kind of the first indication that something's not quite right, and that we learn that it's actually used a lot to sort of as an early sign that the predator is nearby. And we actually see Poncho. He stares up at something in the trees for a few seconds before he turns his head and looks at something else. So, you know, it almost kind of makes you wonder if something in his military training is sort of, is he suspecting something? Is there something going on that he can't quite put his finger on, but he sort of knows that there's something's off about this?
To go along with that, that's like when you zoom into his face, that's when you have those drums playing. And I like that cut right in the middle of this minute, in that when you have that kind of reset of a scene, sometimes that can be like a relief to the audience, because you're saying, oh, like, okay, like we're pulling back a little bit from this tense moment, like when they're first landing in the jungle, but then those like drums arrive as soon as like you're zooming in on Poncho's face, and the drums are like very like hurried and like disorienting. Like I can't imagine, like, I don't know, I was trying to put myself, if I'm in the jungle and you hear those drums, I can't imagine like the fear like some novice or rookie would have, like at that point, saying, oh my God, like are there other people out here? And right, like you're saying, it's to drive home the point that there's something different about this mission. There's something off.
Absolutely. Then from there, Poncho he turns his head and heads out of frame, and then it's still the same shot that we've got Hawkins now.
Well, they transition with the rack focus, which is honestly, like, after learning what that was, it became like my favorite kind of shot, and John McTiernan uses this excellently throughout this movie, where as soon like Poncho's in the foreground, his head goes out of frame, and then the blurrier background becomes in focus, all in the same shot, which is like so masterful. And the one technical difficulty I heard with rack focuses is that it's really hard to do special effects with a rack focus in the same shot. So you have to make sure everything you're doing is right, the practical,
very well choreographed.
Yeah, very well choreographed. There's no fixing really a rack focus. It would look very cartoonish.
It's interesting when you because I remember sort of when you're talking about shots that change focus like this, because I remember one of Christopher Nolan's movies, because when you shoot on actual film, and it's not like digital where you can kind of instantly play it back. When you shoot on film, you have to wait to actually get it. Sort of, it takes a while to actually see what it is you shot. And I remember in one of Christopher Nolan's movies, maybe in The Dark Knight, that they shot a scene and they shot it perfectly, except when they actually went to look at the film a few hours later, they realized that it had been shot out of focus.
Oh no.
And they had to go back and reshoot the scene again. And so I think this was obviously made back in 87. So there's no digital, this is all film. So it's impressive, even something like that, where they're changing focus, but they're such professionals about, that this is all okay. And it's, everything's in focus where it needs to be.
That's really impressive that like Nolan is right, that studious as well as of a filmmaker, which is, and this is like always a testament I go back to, which is that, it's a shame McTiernan didn't make more movies past like 2003, when he was quagmiring himself in all sorts of legal troubles and doing things he really wasn't supposed to be doing. Right. So I feel like we lost a real person who really wanted to make movies and make them well. So I don't know, makes it all the more valuable that he's made something like this that we can look at a minute at a time.
No, for sure.
As they rack focus back to the background, we see Hawkins and Blaine. They start moving. Honestly, it looks like they're waiting on their marks a little bit, and then when the rack focuses on the background on them, it's almost like they're waiting for their little cue. Then it's like, okay, go. But that, again, speaks to how when you do it on film, everything has to be so well choreographed. You can't have something, have people going early and being lost in the shot.
Absolutely. So once it comes in onto Hawkins now, we've got the music starts to change a little bit. It's still very, what I would say is it's not like sort of flowing music where it's a theme that's worked on, but it's a lot of kind of different disparaging sounds, not just drums, but now different musical tones. And it's again, very, separate pieces kind of colliding. And it's another way that they're sort of using score and sound design to reinforce the disorientation of being in the jungle. Have you ever seen the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston?
Probably a long time ago, like back in the
Okay.
80s.
So that movie came out in '68, I want to say. But the score there did something similar where, it's one way to disorient people is just with music is just to have a lot of these separate sounds colliding. So it's very, very much reminded me of that. But Hawkins seems to have it together enough, at least to, walk on over to Dutch. And I think he's just kind of letting him know that the coast is clear on his end.
Yeah, and then Dutch gives a little signal with, this kind of like, I don't know, exact arm motion where it's kind of upward, but also kind of like sweeping forward. I would think it has something to do with maybe Poncho climbing a tree in the next few seconds. That's kind of my guess. And if that's the case, if that is the actual actor, Richard Chavez, like that makes the shot all the more impressive because it's just continuing on. Like now, we had the close up of your face looking around. We saw you leave the shot, and then all of a sudden,
walking up,
we see your boots as they're
very, very
ascending
well placed there.
Yeah.
And I do like that little, so right after Hawkins has tapped Dutch's shoulder and he signals over, it does go, the camera passes and there's that plant that's like right up in on the camera, again out of focus, but it's another indication about how hard it is to sort of see in the jungle, that there's, even in a planned shot like this, there's still stuff sort of in the foreground that just makes it very hard. Same thing sort of with the tree or the thing that he's walking up, that you just go right under it. Your vision is temporarily obscured there.
Right, and I think you made a note concerning that of the of McTiernan talking about just how hard it was to shoot in the jungle.
Yeah, I remember. I remember watching a making of at one point where they're talking about this, because obviously the challenge is, in order for people and cameras and these crew to be able to move, there was this weird push and pull of they needed to clear out some of the plants and some of the foliage and stuff in order to be able to do that, but they couldn't do it too much or else you lose the sense that you're in a jungle. And they said that was a very difficult thing to kind of manage, that balance of, you still need to be in the jungle, but you also need to be able to move all this equipment that you're using to make this film. So he said it was a very challenging thing to do.
Right. Plus you're destroying the environment. So you have to and you're not in the US, you're in a different country, right? They're filming this in Mexico, these scenes. And I'm not really sure when the switch happens, but it happens sometime in the movie where they are filming in Puerto Vallarta for some scenes and they're filming in Palenque on the Yucatan Peninsula. And those are, from what I've read, those are two different forest types, where I believe one is more seasonal. I think the Puerto Vallarta rainforest is much more seasonal, to the point where some of the shots when they're first filming were really making McTiernan mad, because they're like noticing that they're filming in a season in which not a ton of leaves are on the trees, or a lot of leaves are brown, and they're having to put on the green themselves. So it's that movie magic where I can't really tell necessarily scene to scene, but if I were to like maybe jump around in the movie, I'd see that difference.
Yeah.
Then he lobbied to move the production to a more traditional jungle environment, and that's where they went to the Yucatan Peninsula, where more dense, more green, the right season, I guess.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So there are seasonal forests in Mexico. I didn't know that.
That's
a nice little environmental lesson.
Yeah, it's not something we necessarily think about when we talk about the jungle, but that just like any other place, if it's far enough from the equator, then you're going to have seasons.
Even jungles can have seasons. I think you mentioned this earlier, that the kind of the last shot we get in this minute is just another sort of shot where it's leaves obscuring things, and just again, it's what I would say this minute is sort of highlighting is just disorientation of the jungle. Mm-hmm. So that's what it closes on.
Yeah, here. Welcome to the jungle. You're gonna die. So I had a question for you, and then I was gonna talk a little bit about the field manual for the Army concerning jungle operations. But before I do, Patrick, what is your history with the movie Predator? And then after this, I'm going to ask you your favorite scene and or line.
Okay. So I remember it very distinctly that the first time I ever saw Predator was I was in the 7th grade, so I would have been 12 or 13 at the time, and it was on FX. Did you used to get the it's still around.
It's still around, but yeah, we just do everything internet nowadays. We don't have the cable package.
Well, back in the day when people had cable, FX was a channel people got, and at the time they were showing it a lot. So I remember I was watching it, and my dad actually came in, and in general, I mean, there were a few things my dad shared in common, but it would always surprise me when he actually knew something from pop culture. Yeah. But literally, it was a moment where he walked in and said, "Oh, you're watching Predator," and it was this weird, "Oh, he knows what this is." And I was watching the ending, so it's one of those things that can happen when you're watching stuff on TV is you see the end of a movie and then you're like, oh, that's really nice. I hope that's on again, so I can watch the rest of it. And luckily it was, because FX at the time was doing they called it DVD on TV, but they would show movies, and then in addition to showing the movies, they would also show extras from like what you would see in a DVD. So they actually would do this. Predator was one of the main ones they showed. So they would show a lot of the behind the scenes stuff as they were showing the movie. So I watched. I mean, I must have watched Predator like 5 or 6 times in that stretch there. So that's my first experience with Predator. I've got
okay.
I got a couple others. I remember. Fast forward a bit to when I was 19. I was home. I must have been like spring break from college or something. And, other people were like going to the beach or whatever. I was just chilling at my dad's house again. And I was downstairs in the basement and Predator was on. So, I just watched it all the way through. So and on TV, it took 2-3 hours. Mm-hmm. And, by the time you're done with Predator, I mean, if your blood isn't pumping, there's something going on.
Oh yeah, you just need to dive into like Total Recall or RoboCop or Terminator. Yeah, something just as juicy.
Mm-hmm. But I walked up, and by the time I came up, it was midnight, and I walked up, and a deer had gotten in our yard, and so I walked up, and I'm walking through the living room of the house, and all of a sudden I just see the silhouette of this deer against the moonlight, and I'm pumped, and it was just this like kind of this adrenaline-filled gasp. Oh my God, there's a deer! So those are my 2 main experiences, and then just periodically I go in and I rent it or I watch it. It's a fun one certainly to revisit.
Those are some awesome experiences. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
I'll ask your line and just like your favorite line here in a minute, but what I usually do every minute is talk about any differences between the script and the movie. And this being a silent scene, they also keep a silent scene in the script itself. They're just describing the motions and the hand gestures, the thickness of the jungle, but there's really nothing extra added to the movie or taken away from the movie that the script originally put in. So like I said before, silent minute in terms of dialogue. It's really nice letting all the camera do the work and the actors actually physically act. Yeah, on that note, what would be your favorite line or your favorite scene or both from this movie?
Favorite line? Well, the one that comes to mind is if it bleeds, we can kill it.
Yep.
I actually, it's just a very awesomely hardcore line, but I take it as a little bit of an inspirational line, as far as if something can be defeated, then you'll find a way to do it. If it's possible, you can find a way to do it. I sometimes find myself when I have a challenge at work or whatever, I whisper to myself, if it bleeds, we can kill it.
Oh man, that is cool. I like the inspiration. Yeah.
And then did you also, I forget, did you ask for a favorite scene or?
Yeah, if you have a favorite scene, love to hear it.
Favorite scene is actually, it's actually at the very end. So spoiler alert, but it's at the very end when after the little thermo nuke has gone off and then the choppers see it and they...
What? Patrick, I haven't even seen the end of the movie. This is breaking some kind of unwritten rule.
Oh, should I have wrapped that in a spoiler alert? But,
heavy spoiler alert. Hashtag spoilers.
Okay.
All right.
Hashtag spoilers. and the chopper's descending, and it's just Arnold with the mist separating, and he's in this, cleared field from all the thermo, that's been cleared out, and the little trumpet line that plays, I think is literally, I'm not joking here, one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written. And there was a time in my life where 17 or 18-year-old Patrick would have said, when I die, that's what you're playing at my funeral as I'm being lowered down into the ground.
All right, and hey, it's this is going to be evergreen, so we're going to be holding you to that. We'll let the people know in your last will and testament you want to have that played. And
yep.
Yeah, I mean that ending, it does tug at me too. That's awesome. Okay, cool. So that's the last scene. Cool. You like that last scene, and seeing the survivor flown away in the chopper. Finally, in prepping for this minute, looking at the dialogue and the music and the vegetation, couldn't help but think, now that they're in the jungle, I really wanted to see what kind of tips there would be for surviving in the jungle, specifically related to military tactics. And luckily I was able to find a PDF online that calls itself the Field Manual for the Army, Jungle Operations, 1982, which in itself sounds like this awesome action movie I would watch, break down a minute at a time. But it was really awesome to be able to find something like this near 200-page manual, supposedly given to commanders, soldiers, and on down the line for those about to execute some operations in the jungle. I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, but it's quite remarkable, and something I've been totally planning on talking about from now until I can basically until I can. Throughout the minutes. So did you have a chance to look at this? I mean, it's not required reading.
Yeah, no, I glanced through the excerpt that you put on there. So it's interesting stuff.
Okay. Yeah. And I was just going to read a couple excerpts. In the teaching biz, this is called enrichment, or realia. We also call it REALIA, where you take something from here's something real. It's I know applying realism to this movie isn't always the way to go, or the one-to-one analog, and that's
if the shoe fits, man. If the
shoe fit, if it bleeds,
yep,
we can read it. But this manual, like I said, and it covers so many different things, about 200 pages long. It covers everything from defining the different types of jungle, to identifying jungle threats, to jungle combat logistics. Just colloquially, when we talk about jungle, trying to find a definition online that really nails that down is really hard to do, because what you end up learning, trying to define what a jungle is, you're just learning that it's really any kind of woods that are hard to traverse, whether that be because of the weather, the level of visibility due to heavy canopy, or the lack of maneuverability due to heavy vegetation. But a lot of things can fit in that category of jungle. Mm-hmm. Is it okay if I read a little bit from
Absolutely.
The manual? Awesome. So it opens with a quote from British Field Marshal William Slim, or we just call him Slim for short. But he was a decorated officer in the British military during World Wars I and II, and he's most famous for the Burma campaign, which saw British commanders stationed in India using British and Indian troops to fight the Japanese through the Burmese jungles, and essentially giving rise to this modern jungle warfare strategies, technologies. And here's Slim right in the beginning of the field manual, very fitting, giving the quote saying, "To our men, the jungle was a strange, fearsome place. Moving and fighting in it were a nightmare. We are too ready to classify jungle as impenetrable. To us, it appeared only as an obstacle to movement. To the Japanese, it was a welcome means of concealed maneuver and surprise. The Japanese reaped the deserved reward. We paid the penalty." And then it dives into where in the world some major jungles are. It's a really, really simple map legend saying, northeastern South America and Central America, or Central West Africa, a little bit of Southeast Africa along the Indian coastline, Southeast Asia, the different Pacific islands. Then it breaks down some of the different jungle types: tropical rainforest, deciduous, swamps, savanna, bamboo. And the last thing I will leave you with, reading wise, is chapter 2 talks all about life in the jungle. And I just want to read the big quote from chapter 2, the intro, and then we'll jump into some hazards. But this is a quote from the report from the 25th Infantry Division in the Republic of Vietnam. Jungle fighting is not new to U.S. soldiers, nor does the enemy have a monopoly on jungle know-how. U.S. units adapted well to jungle fighting, and when we operated against the North Vietnamese army along the Cambodian border, we found that they had as much difficulty operating in the area as we did. The prisoners we captured there were, as a rule, undernourished, emaciated, and sick with malaria. They stated that almost everyone in their unit had malaria and many had died from it. So that's an interesting quote, almost going opposite of the first quote, saying our soldiers, like, it's this jungle is like this hard thing to maneuver, not just for us, but even enemies who you would think would be used to the jungle. Yep. And just a funny little excerpt right after that quote, they're starting to introduce and trying to put your mind at ease as a soldier reading all these quotes and learning about the jungle. It says, there is very little to fear from the jungle environment. Fear itself can be an enemy. Soldiers must be taught to control their fear of the jungle. A man overcome with fear is of little value in any situation. Soldiers in a jungle must learn that the most important thing is to keep their heads and calmly think out any situation. And then it goes on for the next 10 pages talking about all the hazards of the jungle. Mm-hmm. Talks about insects, the climate, leeches, snakes, crocodiles, poisonous plants, other wild animals, just health and hygiene in general, diseases, fungus, heat stroke, natives. And right before that, they're saying fear is your greatest threat in this jungle. And I would go, well, I don't know, because
fear is your greatest threat, but you may want to watch out for these too.
But all these actual physical things.
Certainly the advice about keeping your head cool and working out whatever problems are coming your way, I think that's good advice for Dutch and his team, given what they'll be encountering. But
people like Mac, I can't help but think of Mac, like, oh, he was not up to speed on his field manual.
Yep, if he had just read that a little bit more, you never know. It's a little bit of advice.
You wouldn't be having some fun later on, and oh my god, no, it's just made me laugh. I'll save some of the next sections, jungle survival tips, for minute 13. Yeah, if you want some extra reading on jungle strategy for the army back in the 80s, this is a fun little guide to have, complete with illustrations and your sidebars and all the things that make a really good feature article, which is something we teach the students in 6th grade these days, how to make a good feature article. Maybe I'll use this as a good example.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, I will say just one more enrichment thing. Just if you want to do some extra research about the origin of modern day jungle tactics, someone you have to research is this British commander named Ord Wingate. He was somewhat of a rival of William Slim, and butted heads a lot during World War II. But Ord Wingate really pushed these tactics to the point of helping the morale of the British back home, and hearing that, hey, they're having some success in the Pacific campaign. And so he's well known for kind of pushing forward these modern tactics of jungle operations. Ord Wingate. So I'm not going to really go into detail about him, but anything we've been missing so far, Patrick, that you can think of right now?
Yeah, it's interesting now that when you've talked about, I think, malaria, when you read in one of the things you just read, and in the list of things to be wary of, there's issues of insects. It sort of is. I think it's interesting in the context of this movie, sort of because
none of those apply to them.
Yeah. They are all. I mean, they're out walking around and with their bare arms showing, and they're just
shaving.
Yeah, shaving, bare arms. They're just letting it all out there, and they'll only lose articles of clothing as the film goes on.
Yep.
So they're clearly a fearless sort.
Yeah, they'll even come across and overcome other humans as obstacles, just as well armed as they are. But like another thing that's not really a threat to them in this jungle. There's only one real threat in this jungle.
It's coming.
Did you have anything from any previous minutes? Since this is your first minute on, we've already had 11 minutes up till now. We had the mission debrief and the helicopter ride, the handshake.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tangent, but it sort of fits in. So
do it.
So earlier when Blaine talks about how what he's chewing will make you what's that phrase? A sexual tyrannosaurus.
A goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus,
Yep.
just like me.
It's interesting because obviously when he said that, he was referring to Tyrannosaurus as a very, as a vision of sort of raw masculinity. This is sort of back when, before we knew that dinosaurs were more like birds, so we always thought of them as big, scaly, lizardy, crocodile things. And that imagery doesn't quite work for a while because as paleontologists have gone on and they've said, dinosaurs are like birds and dinosaurs had feathers, and then they started pushing for a while that T-Rex had feathers, which doesn't quite fit that imagery because they started to make, when you'd see scientific depictions of T-Rex, he was covered in like a very large turkey or chicken or something. But I'm happy to say that I came across an article last year that paleontologists found some new fossil evidence, and now they're happy to say that now the current theory is that T-Rex actually didn't have feathers, and he's got he's got scales again. So I think the validity of Blaine's metaphor has been preserved for future generations.
All right, yeah, we can still use that quote with all sorts of pride. At least the second part of that quote.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Absolutely. And then the other thing, I was thinking of, it's the Long Tall Sally as music that they're kind of using, that they're playing while they're in that helicopter. And I was thinking, if I were, what would I be playing? If I were, and I think you mentioned earlier, Welcome to the Jungle. I wouldn't mind putting that on if I was going on a jungle mission. And for what it's worth, Welcome to the Jungle came out in '87, which is the same year Predator. So if Guns N' Roses wanted to get a little foothold in there, it may have been to the benefit of both parties. But
totally. Yeah, that's Guns N' Roses, and they ended up doing the big track for Terminator 2. One of Arnold's other huge movies.
Yep.
That's funny. Welcome to the Jungle. Yeah, I think of that song every now and then with watching this, just like, yep. And they say the whole "you're all gonna die." It's like, or "you're gonna die," and it's like what Billy says later on, like, "We're all gonna die."
Yep. It works.
Yeah, it works for the movie. Something I meant to ask you early on was this is looking like some really hard to traverse territory, terrain, what have you. What's the most difficult landscape you've had to make your way across?
As far as hikes that I've done, it was actually one I did relatively recently. So I was up around Lake Placid in New York State a couple of weeks ago, and there's a trail up there going up to, I think the mountain's name is Cascade, but it's a short, it's only about a 2-mile trail one way, but it basically goes straight up this mountainside. The mountain's not called Cascade for nothing, because the trail there's no it's not really a trail, it's just a whole bunch of boulders are all along this trail, to the point where at any point you're walking, you're putting your feet on boulders, and it's actually pretty, you have to work and actually think about where you're going to be putting your feet on this thing, both going up and coming down, because it is possible to slip and lose your balance, and then you'll go tumbling down. So top of my head, I think that's the most treacherous path I've been on.
That sounds that sounds terrifying, kind of. And you can't, and then you don't want to overthink it. Like, I must think about it enough to know where to put my foot, but I don't want to overthink it and think like that I could be slipping on every single one of these and leading to all sorts of bad news.
Yep. So still a fun hike, but it's definitely had to think about that one a bit.
Okay. Gosh, I think the last thing I wanted to ask was, what do you think of The Predator? I have, when I say The Predator, I mean the most recent movie, and I have your review right in front of me. But why don't you speak to this new movie called The Predator?
Well, the Cliff Notes version is I did not like it. Did not was not a fan of it. It's kind of
did not like.
It was a film that I don't think was ever. I don't think it was ever strongly written, but it was neither written well nor was it assembled well. There's a lot of what I'm gonna say now is gonna sound a little bit paradoxical, but it's full of a lot of bad dialogue and underwhelming moments, and it's all much too short. And what I mean by that is that the movie clocks in at I forget, something like an hour and 40 minutes, but there's a lot missing in it. So I'm thinking it's been a trend in studios as of late that when they don't believe in a film, they sort of will hack it down for time because they can get more showings in a day to do that. So I'm pretty sure this was a victim of that. And so it's this, the result is there's a lot, I think, that was taken out of this. So it's really just kind of a disorienting mess to watch. You know, a lot of, none of the human characters I thought were compelling.
Yeah, I did not like any of the human characters, and like that's such a selling point for me for something. If I don't like it, like there's no stakes for me then.
The action is really bad, and particularly for the Predator standards, because Predator movies, even some of the other ones, like I thought Predators had pretty good action in it. I thought Predator 2, say what you will about Danny Glover, but he works in the action scenes in that movie. But the action I thought was really bad here. Some of the moments in the Predator are just hard to comprehend. Like the one I'm thinking of is where.
Is this a spoiler? Are we wrapping this in a spoiler?
I guess, yeah.
All right, let's wrap it. Like, since this movie is like actually this year versus the Predator, which.
So spoiler. There is a scene in The Predator where there is a predator in the back of a van or a truck or something with a severed arm, and the guy driving this vehicle thinks there's somebody in the back and he asks him, "Are you okay?" And the predator extends this severed arm with a thumbs up to indicate that he's okay. And it is one of those moments where you kind of stop and you go, oh, somebody actually, Shane Black wrote that into the screenplay. It's just weird. The other one of the other things I thought was pretty frustrating about the movie was that it ends on a pretty big tease where so now this is really a spoiler because this is the end of the film. It turns out that there's different predators in the movie, and one ostensibly wants to help people. I say ostensibly because there's conflicting evidence.
Maybe if you add up all his actions, still it's hard to tell what he's trying to do.
But supposedly he wants to help people, and he's brought humanity a gift in the form of an anti-predator suit that human beings can wear, and it looks a little bit like, you know, it's armor with kind of the predator mask on it, and that would have been at least a new direction for the series, but it certainly ends on you will have to wait for a sequel that probably won't happen. But it's an interesting idea. I just wish it came in at the end of a better movie. And also, while I'm on the subject, one of the plot points in The Predator is that there's a kind of a wonderkin kid who's really, really intelligent, and so intelligent that he kind of hacks in or accesses advanced alien technology, but he nevertheless thinks it's a good idea to take a predator mask and use it as a Halloween mask. So he's smart enough to decode it, and not prudent enough to realize that I could go on. But it's not a good movie. It's sort of, moments of it are fascinating, but not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah.
It's sort of, like I said, it's not written well. It's not put together well. It's a missed opportunity. That's the nicest way I can put it. It's a missed opportunity. I would say, and it's surprising because it came from Shane Black, who's involved in the first one, and I think we were all optimistic he was going to put this where it needed to be.
It was disappointing. I totally agree with you. There's so many little cuts here and there where the edits were just glaring in your face how badly they were done, or how much the studio, like you said, had chopped things out. Where there's one scene where they're all in an RV all of a sudden, and there's no establishment of where this RV came from. Much later, they're like in the alien, or they're in the Predator ship, and like I can't remember the guy's name. Traeger, I think is the character name. Help me out. Sterling K. Brown, right?
Yeah.
He in one scene, I can't remember if it's before or after, like, but he goes from like either shades or no shades, or he either goes from shades to no shades or no shades to shades in back to back cuts, like not even scenes, but like back to back cuts. He's like inside the Predator ship, and it's such a forgettable movie that I've forgotten which one it is, if it's without or with shades that he's in there next.
There's blatant continuity error.
Yeah. The ending totally reminded me of Independence Day Resurgence. Did you see that one?
I did, and I have very. Yeah. I swear by the first Independence Day, and the Independence Day Resurgence was another. It was like the Predator, another very disappointing sequel.
Yep, and trying to set up everything to like, we're gonna kick these aliens' butts later. Like, I don't think you are. I think the studio wins this one, or popular or unpopular fan opinion wins this one.
The key to ending the movie with the setup for a sequel is making a movie that's worth having a sequel made for it. That's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, just really frustrating. And the dogs they have are really weird, because the dogs are kind of like Earth dogs, which they mention that the Predators were doing gene splicing. So the one quasi deep thought that I had about that movie was, did they just decide that they'd take some dog DNA and splice that in, and that's what those things. I mean, that's it's. I don't know, but it's certainly nothing the movie bothers to comment on, but I thought that was weird.
Yeah, I thought it was weird because they're totally retroactively changing like the whole reasonings of these first few movies, where you think these first few movies are the hunters testing themselves in the jungle and in the city, and later on their like hunting planet, but then you find out in this movie, no, they're doing it because they want the DNA.
Yeah.
What? It's like, it's skating awfully close to the Aliens universe, even though they share universe. I don't think it makes sense to have both of like your heavy hitters doing the same thing. Of like, oh, we're just gonna absorb the DNA of like these huge muscly dudes, and like that's what's gonna make us better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how about let's stop talking about the Predator. Let's talk about you more, though, Patrick. Where can people find you?
So as far as finding me, I shouldn't call it a website, but my blog is probably the best place to find my thoughts, which is, again, the blog. You can find it at Z Movie Reviews, all one word, .wordpress.com. Otherwise, if you go to Google and type in Z Movie Reviews, I think it'll pop up. But I try to get a few posts a month, usually on whatever the most recent movies that I'm able to go check out, but I also do classic movies too. So that's the most direct way to find me.
Sweet. Predator Minute is part of a much larger network of podcasts, the Movies by Minute podcast, which in all fairness started with Gutterballs, which was a weekly breakdown of the movie The Big Lebowski, but then this Movies by Minute format didn't truly gain popularity until Alex and Pete started Star Wars Minute, in which they break down the Star Wars movies, including the saga movies and the recent spin-offs, 1 minute at a time. I believe they started with Star Wars, the motion picture, 1977. Way back in 2013, and they're just now entering the Force Awakens season, and all the Star Wars Minute fans are very excited about this, starting in the next week or so, we hope. So if you want a complete list, though, of how many movies follow, or how many podcasts follow this format of analyzing movies 1 minute at a time, you can go to moviesbyminutes.com. And you're mentioning Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes does have their own minute breakdown. It's just called Minute of the Apes. So if you're ever curious about, do you what is your favorite movie? And I wonder if it's covered by the minute movie format.
I'd be curious. I would say when people ask me what my favorite movie is, I usually respond with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I don't know if that's on there, but because some of these podcasts, they have like an inclusive name or something like that, where it's not necessarily the name of the movie, but it might be like part of like the, what is that trilogy called?
The Man with No Name, or the Dollars trilogy, or
the Dollars trilogy. Yeah. So I don't know if that's actually one. That seems like that would be right before that, though.
Yeah,
With
no,
just all the,
I'd be interested to hear a minute by minute on that one.
there you go. There's something that the people can hop on. Our music, our bumper music, intro and outro, is a cover of the Predator theme by Alan Silvestri. The cover is provided by guitarist Chaosware. That's Kaosware, Chaosware. I asked him permission when we first started putting this podcast together, and he said, "Sure, just give me the credit when you talk about the music." And there you go, Chaosware. Thanks again for the music. If you had some difficult terrain that you've had to traverse with or without aliens hunting you, send us an email at predatorminute@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, at Predator Minute. We host our files on SoundCloud, so that's always the easiest place to find the RSS feed and the most up-to-date downloads. But you'll also find us fed through iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, other podcatching apps. And it looks like that's everything for this minute. So for Predator Minute, I'm Jon.
And I'm Patrick.
And until next time,
if it bleeds, we can kill it.
da 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 da.